I always thought our marriage was perfect, until one night. My wife said she had a late work meeting, but something felt off. I shouldn't have followed her, but I did. From a distance, I watched as the apartment door opened, and I froze. She was smiling at someone familiar, someone I never expected. In that moment, I realized I'd been blind. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was a lie. My name is Daniel Harris, but everyone calls me Dan. I've always been the calm, steady type, the one who keeps life organized, keeps people safe, keeps promises. And for 10 years, I believed that steadiness had built a life unshakable, until that night. It started months earlier, in ways I didn't notice. Little things at first, a text she'd quickly hide when I walked into the room, a smile at her phone that didn't include me, an excuse here, an appointment there. I chalked it up to stress, to work, to the ebb and flow of marriage. But the closer I looked, the more pieces didn't fit. I remember the morning she came home from work that week, late and tired, her perfume stronger than usual. She laughed at a joke I didn't hear and brushed past me like I was just part of the furniture. That night, I lay awake, listening to the quiet hum of the city, wondering if I was imagining it. I wasn't. Something had changed. Days turned into weeks. She began staying later at the gym, talking about new projects at work, texting in the bathroom, and closing her laptop quickly whenever I approached. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was normal. But deep down, my gut was screaming. Something was wrong. One afternoon, she called me from a client meeting. Her voice was light, casual, almost careless. "I'll be home late tonight, Dan. Don't wait up." She hung up before I could respond, and for the first time, I noticed the tremor in my own hands. Not from anger, but from fear. From the creeping suspicion that my life wasn't what I thought it was. I began paying attention to patterns. Every Friday evening she claimed she had work deadlines, yet somehow always seemed relaxed when she got home on Saturday mornings. Random expenses appeared on our joint account. Dinners at restaurants I had never heard of. Gifts I wasn't included in. Receipts that didn't match her schedule. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. The following week, I found myself standing outside our building, pretending to be a man on a walk. She had said she was attending a networking event, but I had a sinking feeling, a whisper in my chest, that she was lying. I watched her get into her car, the way she sat slightly forward, hands tight on the steering wheel. Something about her posture, about the way she glanced around before driving off, made my stomach twist. I shouldn't have followed her. But I did. And as I trailed her from a distance, every stoplight, every turn, felt like hours. My mind raced through every conversation we'd had over the last few months, every small lie I had ignored, every fleeting feeling of unease. By the time she arrived at a building I didn't recognize, my heart was pounding like I'd never felt before. The apartment door opened, and I froze. She stepped inside, smiling, but she wasn't alone. There, in the dim glow of the hallway light, was someone I knew, someone I trusted, someone I would have never imagined could betray me alongside her. My knees went weak. My chest tightened. Every memory, every laugh we had shared, suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. That moment, the way she looked at him, the casualness of it all, made something inside me break. I had thought I knew her completely, understood every nuance of our marriage. But here she was, in a world I had never seen, laughing, touching, sharing something intimate with someone who had been part of my life for years. I stepped back into the shadows, my mind spinning. Should I confront them? Should I storm in and demand answers? Or should I stay quiet, observe, collect proof? My instincts screamed at me to act, but another part of me, the part that had built a life carefully, methodically, told me patience would be my weapon. Walking home that night, I replayed the scene over and over. Every detail mattered. The tilt of her head, the way his hand lingered too long, the way she laughed at something trivial but intimate. It all added up, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. And yet, beneath the shock, a plan began to form in my mind. I would not react in haste. I would watch, I would wait, and I would make sure that when the truth came out, it would hit harder than anything she could imagine. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart heavy but mind sharp. I realized that marriage wasn't just love and trust. It was also observation, intuition, and courage. If I wanted answers, if I wanted control back over my life, I couldn't just hope. I had to act. But first, I needed to understand the full extent of the betrayal. The days after that night blurred into a mix of anxiety, calculation, and quiet observation. I couldn't shake the image of her laughing in that apartment, the familiarity she shared with someone I thought I could trust. Every glance, every word she spoke to me afterward carried a shadow I couldn't ignore. It was as if she had stepped into a parallel life, a life I wasn't invited to, but desperately needed to understand. I began noticing patterns I had missed before. Subtle changes in her schedule, small deviations from her usual routine, the careful way she hid her phone. Even the way she answered questions, casual yet slightly evasive, started to feel rehearsed. I knew instinctively that she was covering something, but the question gnawed at me. Was it emotional distance, or was it something far much worse? Determined to find answers, I started my own quiet investigation. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but methodically. I needed proof, something undeniable, before I confronted her. I began documenting her absences, noting times and dates. I observed the hours she spent on her phone, the text messages she sent when she thought I wasn't watching. I even started comparing receipts, transactions, and appointments that didn't align with her stories. Each discovery tightened the knot in my stomach, but it also clarified the picture. Something deliberate was happening, and it wasn't just casual dishonesty. It was a betrayal carefully hidden. One afternoon, I decided to take it further. I set up a small camera in a shared parking lot near the office she claimed to visit daily. I needed to confirm her stories visually. I also began paying attention to her social media, noticing subtle cues. Photos cropped to hide someone in the background, comments exchanged with names I didn't recognize. Everything was a breadcrumb, and I had grown determined to follow the trail. It was during one of these late-night observations that I discovered the first undeniable proof. She wasn't merely sneaking away from me. She was meeting someone she shouldn't have been. Someone I knew. Someone I had welcomed into our lives, trusted, and even admired. My heart sank as I pieced together the timeline. It all made sense. The late meetings, the sudden changes in appearance, the extra hours at the gym that never seemed necessary. She had crafted a story so carefully that I hadn't noticed the inconsistencies until I actively looked for them. I kept my composure in front of her, though. I had to. If she sensed my awareness, if she caught a glimpse of my suspicion, it would all be lost. I couldn't let her know I had seen her, that I knew the truth. So I played the part of the oblivious husband, laughing at her jokes, pretending not to notice her subtle glances at her phone, acting the way I had always acted. Inside, though, my mind was a storm of calculations. Every move she made, every message she sent, every word she spoke, I cataloged it. It was during one particularly quiet evening, sitting alone in our apartment, that the full extent of the betrayal began to reveal itself. I had followed her that night, careful and hidden, as she slipped out of the house under the pretense of yet another work meeting. The street was empty, the city asleep. But my mind was wide awake, alert to every detail. I followed her to the same building I had spotted weeks ago. She entered the lobby, and moments later, I saw the door to one of the apartments open. And there he was. It wasn't just anyone. He was someone I trusted deeply, someone I would never have suspected. And yet, there they were together, exchanging looks and gestures that were far too intimate to be innocent. My stomach turned, my chest tightened, but I held my ground. I observed quietly, noting everything. The way her hand lingered on his arm, the whisper of laughter, the familiarity in their movements. It was calculated, deliberate, and undeniable. I stepped back, my mind racing through the months leading up to this moment. Every small discrepancy, every excuse, every hidden message now fell into place. This wasn't just an affair, it was a carefully orchestrated betrayal, one that involved someone I had welcomed into our home, someone I had considered family. The weight of it nearly crushed me, but instead of panic, a clarity emerged. I would not act rashly. I would not confront them blindly. I needed a plan, a way to turn the tables and ensure that when the truth came out, it would be undeniable. I began setting small tests, watching for reactions to subtle hints, leaving accidental clues to gauge her responses. Each time she reacted with a careful smile or a hurried explanation, my suspicions were confirmed. I also started checking for financial irregularities, her spending patterns, unaccounted transactions, and subtle investments she had made that didn't include me. It was clear she wasn't just emotionally invested in someone else. She was planning something larger, something that could affect me materially and socially. One evening, I confronted a small piece of her deception indirectly. I asked casually about an expense, pretending not to know the truth, watching her reaction. She faltered, just slightly, and in that brief hesitation, I saw the cracks. The careful facade she had built was fragile. The realization hit me with a cold clarity. She had underestimated me. She had assumed I would remain blind, oblivious, and passive. She was wrong. From that point, my approach became strategic. I collected evidence meticulously, documented every detail, and built a mental map of her movements and interactions. I observed without interfering, understanding that the more she believed she was safe, the more the truth would eventually devastate her. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was calculated, intertwined with someone I had trusted implicitly. And while anger bubbled beneath the surface, I kept it contained, channeling it into precision. The final piece of the puzzle revealed itself one late night. I had followed her again, careful and silent, as she slipped into the familiar apartment. This time, I noticed something new. Documents, conversations, and interactions that hinted at plans beyond the affair. Plans that could compromise not just my heart, but my stability, my career, and my life as I knew it. Everything I had suspected, everything I had quietly observed, pointed to a truth more shocking than I had imagined. I walked home in the early hours, mind racing, heart pounding, and a sense of calm determination settling in. I had seen the betrayal with my own eyes. I had gathered proof. And now, I knew that when the moment came to confront them, I would not just expose the affair. I would ensure the consequences were absolute, undeniable, and unforgettable. The game had begun, and for the first time, I felt the power shifting, from victim to observer, from blind trust to calculated control. By the time I entered the third stage of this nightmare-turned-calculated game, I was no longer just a husband in disbelief. I had become a strategist, a silent observer, and someone who understood the full scope of the betrayal. Every late night, every hidden message, every subtle interaction had been catalogued, stored, and transformed into a map of their deception. I knew the endgame had to be precise. Impulsive confrontation would accomplish nothing. I had to control the narrative, and I had to ensure the consequences were absolute. The morning after my final observation, I sat in our kitchen, coffee untouched, replaying everything in my mind. Their interactions, the stolen laughter, the secret meetings, all of it was now a weapon. I made a list, mentally and meticulously. Dates, times, photographs, receipts, messages. Everything I needed to dismantle their carefully constructed illusion. I knew the exact moment she would feel secure, and I would strike then. Timing was everything. I started small, testing reactions subtly. A casual remark about loyalty here, a question about honesty there, each one a quiet probe into her psyche. She laughed, deflected, and reassured me without suspecting the storm that was brewing. The person she was involved with, someone I had trusted implicitly, remained unaware of my scrutiny. Every misstep they made, every careless gesture, only tightened the noose I had been patiently crafting. Then came the moment I had been preparing for, the perfect intersection of opportunity and leverage. I invited her to dinner under the guise of reconciliation, an attempt to appear normal, loving, and unsuspecting. The place was quiet, secluded, a setting that allowed no interruptions. The tension in the air was palpable, though she didn't notice it yet. I watched her gestures, the nervous way she touched her glass, the subtle glance at her phone before she silenced it. Every second, every micro-expression confirmed that she was unaware of the full scope of my awareness. I began slowly, narrating memories we shared, highlighting the trust and intimacy that had once defined us. Her smiles were polite. her eyes slightly wary. But she didn't suspect anything. And then I introduced the evidence. Not aggressively, not with shouting or accusations, but methodically, photographs, messages, financial irregularities. I watched as the color drained from her face, as the laughter that once hid guilt vanished, replaced by shock and disbelief. The person she had betrayed me with, her confidant, her secret partner in deception, was not present physically, but the impact of their actions was undeniable. Every detail I presented traced a web of lies, exposing how carefully they had manipulated circumstances to hide their affair. I saw her mind racing, trying to justify, to explain, to deflect, but it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable. I didn't just stop at exposure. I wanted her to understand the depth of my strategy. I revealed the subtle surveillance I had conducted, the way I had noticed patterns, the calculations I had made. Every action she had taken under the assumption of secrecy had been observed, documented, and now held in my control. The realization of how completely she had underestimated me hit her harder than the betrayal itself. At that moment, the dynamic shifted. No longer was I the betrayed husband. I was the one holding the power. She sat in stunned silence, her attempts at excuses faltering. I could see the weight of fear, regret, and shock in her eyes. The person she thought she was manipulating had been orchestrating a quiet, meticulous counter-strategy all along. I continued, describing the consequences of their actions, not out of cruelty, but as a demonstration of control. Financial arrangements, social exposure, emotional accountability. I left nothing ambiguous. Each revelation was precise, calculated to maximize understanding of the betrayal without unnecessary theatrics. The goal wasn't vengeance in the moment. It was power. The knowledge that I was no longer vulnerable, no longer blind. Then came the final, decisive move. I had prepared a public reveal, one that would ensure the affair's exposure without ambiguity. Invitations, messages, and subtle leaks ensured that mutual friends and close contacts would be aware, creating a ripple effect she could neither contain nor reverse. It wasn't malicious in intent. It was necessary. I had been patient, observant, and strategic. And now, the consequences were inevitable. As the revelation spread, I watched her reaction transform: panic, shame, and the first real taste of fear. The person she had thought was untouchable, who she had believed would never discover the truth, was now fully in command. I had turned the tables completely, converting betrayal into leverage. I was no longer a victim, I was a force to be reckoned with, and they were exposed in every dimension imaginable, socially, emotionally, and psychologically. Even as the fallout unfolded, I maintained composure. There was no shouting, no irrational anger, no public spectacle from me. My satisfaction was in the strategy, the precision, the understanding that the game had been won not through impulsive reaction, but through calculated patience. They had underestimated me. They had believed that secrecy and manipulation could succeed indefinitely. They were wrong. By the end of the week, the full extent of the exposure was undeniable. Friends, colleagues, and close acquaintances had seen evidence, corroborated facts, and understood the betrayal. She attempted to salvage her reputation, to regain footing, but the weight of calculated proof was too heavy. Every lie unraveled, every manipulation exposed, and every trust she had taken for granted was shattered. I sat alone one evening reflecting on the journey from naive trust to strategic mastery. The betrayal had been profound, the shock immense, but the lessons were invaluable. I had learned to trust my instincts, to observe patterns, and to act with precision rather than impulsion. More importantly, I had reclaimed control over my life, my dignity, and my power. In the aftermath, I didn't need revenge for satisfaction. The revelation, the exposure, and the undeniable consequences had accomplished everything necessary. They had been seen, their actions laid bare, and I remained unshaken, in command, and fully aware. The storm had passed, but the lesson remained. Trust can be betrayed, but vigilance, patience, and strategic action ensure that betrayal is never without consequence.